Hello, everybody.
Hello.
People are trickling in. I don't know if the people from are going to be joining us today. This meeting. Give it another couple of minutes, or like a minute or two. So there are inside of the OpenSSF vulnerability disclosures working group notes. If you scroll down past the 8th meeting, there is meeting notes for the Autofix SIG. Please mark off your attendance by removing the formatting for your name so that it will show up as you having attended this SIG call. Alrighty. I think we should just get started, and as people join in later, we can add them in. Yeah. All right. So, hi everybody. My name is Jonathan Lightshoe. I'm the senior software security researcher for Project Alpha Omega. I was the first ever Dan Kaminsky Fellow, and I spent a bunch of time the past year working on automating fixing vulnerabilities at scale across open source. The purpose of this SIG is to discuss the topic of automated vulnerability disclosure across open source and establish some best practices and some norms for this process, which can be very contentious across open source maintainers. And I'm happy to have you all here. Since we are all new to this particular SIG, I'd like to do a round and just give everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves and who they are and where they work and, what brings you to this particular call. So, yeah, does anybody want to jump in and start with their introduction?
I can go ahead and go first. My name's CJ May. I'm kind of new to the OSSF. I'm a senior IT security analyst at Vermeer Corporation, which is a manufacturing company. I do a lot with DevSecOps in my role, but I'm kind of relatively new to AppSec, so I'm here to learn and contribute where I can. I do have a little bit of experience automating a lot of stuff around GitHub within my own organization. So, yeah.
Casimir, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Casimir. I'm a vulnerability researcher at Trellix. I'm here just because I just did a good bit of automated vuln disclosure and patching with the Python, the tar file vulnerability.
Hey everybody, I'm Krobe. Jonathan made me show up for another meeting.
I did.
I am a working group and SIG lead within the OpenSSF. I also sit on the TAC, so I'm just here to help Jonathan facilitate this call. I've been doing open source coordinated vulnerability disclosure for about a decade.
Matt, you want to go next? You are muted still. Technology is hard. Love the blue hair. Spectacular, by the way. Yeah, I know. It doesn't work for you, does it, Krobe?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Yeah, picked up my webcam mic. Yeah, so I'm Matt Smith. I'm a product manager at Google, working specifically in Google Cloud. Some of my other colleagues are much more involved in the open source. I'm more on the product side, but understanding how to do automated vulnerability remediation as it relates to open source as well. And I'm also new to OpenSSF, so just looking to listen and learn what's
Cool.
happening more wide.
Anwar, you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi, I'm Munawar Hafiz. I'm the CEO of Open Refactory. I've been working on refactoring for all my life, so I'm here to remind everybody how difficult refactoring is as we are embarking upon this glorious journey. So thank you.
Yasni, I think you're last.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I see Crow waving, so I took that as yes. Just like Crow, Jonathan also asked me to join, so I'm kind of just following his lead on this one. I'm on the Alpha Omega project as well, working on the engineering of the Omega toolchain and the triage portal in hopes to bring whatever's discussed here into the triage portal to do some of the automation. So yeah.
Cool. Do we have any volunteers for people who want to take meeting notes? Bueller?
I'll assist.
Thank you. All right. And the folks that I are also one of the groups that I invited, two groups that I also invited to this, Modern. I think the two that we're going to join for this are currently on a customer call. And I also reached out to what is the company that it used to be White Source.
Mend.
Yes, Mend I've also reached out to, and I don't think that they are going to. They may end up joining eventually, so we'll see how that goes. So, anyways, so at a high level, one of the reasons that I've brought people together for this particular topic is the Project Alpha Omega is going to be engaging in automated vulnerability remediation at scale across open source as a part of the purview of Alpha Omega. And so I have been going down this route of doing this work kind of independently, but one of the things that would be really excellent is to have a set of standards and best practices established around engaging in this work to minimize the likelihood of upsetting maintainers, and also decreasing the risk of you getting banned by GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab, or all that stuff, right? For doing this stuff. And so in that endeavor, one of the things that I thought through and have written up a draft proposal for is I haven't put this anywhere yet, but it's a specification document that describes a set of requirements for campaigns to be, the title of this doc, I'll actually send it to the group in a moment. Hang on. Fix the title, change the title. The title of this document is Specification OpenSSF Compliant Automated Vulnerability Fix Campaign. And again, not a specification that is in any way endorsed by the OpenSSF yet. It's something that I wrote down and thought together, and I'm thinking that this would be a good sort of starting point. But we could basically have a specification for if your campaign follows these sets of norms, you can throw the Open Source Security Foundation, automated vulnerability fix campaign banner on your pull request and link to this specification and state that you're compliant with these set of requirements. And it will, make it look more official and hopefully make it look like, you will have followed a set of best practices that were endorsed. Go for it, bro.
Do you have a link you can share that we
I
can take?
do.
a peek?
I'm doing that right now. I just had to change the permissions on the document. It is going into into the Slack channel. I will also paste it into the meeting notes. So yes, so you are all welcome to join. You should be able to access that. Perfect. Would love it if you could, if you are going to add feedback or responses on this document, please use your signed in GitHub account so that I can see who you are and, you know, we can have a dialogue instead of it being anonymous Badger and Jonathan chatting back and forth with each other. But yeah, so at a high level, I can go through the bullets of the things that I'm proposing and discuss. Again, nobody's reviewed this document, nobody's seen this document until I just wrote it in the past, 3 hours. So, but at a high level, expecting that any vulnerability that you're going to try to fix at scale, you first try to report it upstream. So if you can get it fixed in the upstream component, the standard library, the library you're relying upon, that's the best thing to do because it's much easier to fix a vulnerability via dependency update than anything else. The second one is a mandatory private disclosure, which requires that any campaign before engaging in this campaign reports this vulnerability to the top. I picked 20 vulnerable projects within the OpenSSF's top 10,000 critical open source projects list. So you have to do private disclosure to at least the 20 projects. If your vulnerability happens to impact 20 projects in the top 10,000 list, you have to report to those 20. Before you engage in automated vulnerability disclosure in this manner. Some messaging requirements around information you must include in the pull request body. Origin requirement that the pull request must originate with a real person's GitHub account instead of a bot account or an organization account. Requirements around communication and responsiveness to the maintainers when you're disclosing this way. A suggestion around targeting specific source code. So if you're going to fix vulnerabilities at scale, don't try to avoid fixing just test code. You can fix test code, but fix test code only if you're also fixing production code. And then commit message format, specifications, host coordination, like reaching out to GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket to let them know you're going to do this work beforehand. And then also finally offering disclosure assistance to the maintainer after the pull request is merged in some manner to help get a CV number if they so desire. So high level list of requirements. And given this, yeah, it's all in the, oh yeah, you're bulleting out, but this is all in the document as the high level numbered items in the document. So I know that none of you have read this fully because there hasn't been enough time, but is there any like glaring point from your experience that with automated vulnerability disclosure that any of you think that may be missed, or as a maintainer, do you think that what should be taken care of to make maintainers most likely to not hate you and or more likely to merge the change?
Yeah, so for the commit message format, I see you have the sign off header, and I don't think that's what I'm thinking of. But what I noticed a lot was they wanted verification on the commits. So the commits had to be verified. Otherwise, a lot of projects would just automatically discard the pull request.
GPG signing. Yes. Commit message format. And yeah, that's a good point. And GPG needs the GPG.
So yeah, when you're done, I have a couple of questions. Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, so so you know that we have been also doing this thing on the side, which is finding out specific different kinds of vulnerabilities on the top 10,000 projects and then reporting them manually to the maintainers. So if we are made, like for example, submitting pull requests, there's something that we also need to do, which is like the CLA signing. And doing this at a small level, well, it's hard, but you can manage. But when you are auto-generating a lot of stuff, is there an automated way of doing that? That's number one question. If you are not doing that, as you were mentioning that the top 20 projects in the top 10,000 list need to have a private vulnerability report. So that's how do you automate that process? And
That's a great question. I don't know. I picked 20, but I'm also like, if we lower that to 10, I also see that as completely reasonable. Like reporting to 10 projects is still a lot of work, right? Like
a lot
manually.
of work, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you plan to, so I mean, you need to find out what's the channel and is it in the security.md file? If it's not, then how do you do that? And so on. So I'm again, like curious to learn because I might use it I will use it in the work that we are doing as well. So
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
useful information.
best effort, right? Kind of it's best effort. There is a guide for reporters that the Open Source Security Foundation put together that's specific to that, and we can link to that guide for how to manually report vulnerabilities to maintainers and as a starting point. That guide kind of goes through like, here are all the places that you might want to look for a disclosure channel. And so I don't have the answers to how do you automate that, but I think that the mandatory private disclosure, one of the things about, we have the critical projects list, right? The thing that you want to do is, even if that requires a manual process for those 10, it's still important to do, right? Like it's, because like there are critical projects out there and we want to try to get as many of the highest critical projects as we can fixed in a way that is more responsible. I hate the term responsible, more controlled. I don't know. And the other question you had was
The CLA.
CLA. Yes, that is so I have just signed a lot of those CLAs. I also put in my disclosures, I can't sign all these CLAs. And if you require me to, like, if you need it to be signed, just close it, right? That is
it's in the report that you originally submitted. It says that because we're doing, so you express your you announce your intent that because you're doing it in bulk, is just not feasible for you to sign, and therefore you're not doing, will not be doing that. How do the maintainers deal with that, or
I won't do it for everybody. Some people just close them. There is a conversation that I'm currently having with LF Legal, because so traditionally I've been doing CLAs, signing myself, because the pull requests have been originating from my personal GitHub account, right? So I can sign those myself, but since this work, at least under moving forward, will be shifting under Alpha Omega, it'll be coming from me, but from me representing Alpha Omega, which is a sub project under
an org,
right? So I can't see. The legal team at the LF does not want me signing CLAs on their behalf, right? They want to be involved with that. So I'm actually engaged in a conversation with the LF legal team about, hey, I'm going to have a bunch of CLAs that I'm going to have to sign. What do you want me to do with them? And answer is, I don't know, right? One of the things that like popped up as an idea from Brian Bellendorf when I spoke to him earlier today was like, are there common enough CLAs that we can hash them and say, like, this is X CLA, we've already reviewed it, we can just sign it, right? Like, it's okay, you can just sign it. Or is anybody that's requiring a CLA having wide variance? Like, are they all, organization specific, in which case this is a bigger problem. That's a big, I don't have the answer to that problem, but it is a problem.
In our case, if that helps, in our case, what we did was, so we have a couple of people who were using an open refactory handle, but then there were like individual triagers who were just like signing on that behalf. So in our case, what we did was we had the organization open refactory signing, like having a different kind of agreement, which is an organizational CLA, but then it is nominating a GitHub user to then submit the pull request, and that. So there we use the GitHub handle that we used in order for submitting all of the pull requests. So there is an organization as Open Refactory. We were signing the CLA, but then we are nominating that this at Open Refactory GitHub user is going to be submitting the pull request, or something like that. So that might. I mean, I'm just like letting you know in case.
Yeah, and one of the things that I am trying to avoid.
And it's actually, sorry to interrupt, it's actually not a fully automated process. Like I've signed for the past, I think like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I think I've signed for ADEX platform where we submitted a bug. We signed that the CLA, I think like 4 or 5 times now. And every time the subsequent run, it is approved, but then in future, it just comes up as not signed, and then you have to sign again. And at this point, they have also given up on figuring out what is going on here. So it's a wild west world out there, and when you're doing it in bulk, that might be something that you'll be encountering. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I don't know how this would.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know how this would hold up on the legal side, but is there some way that you could, along with your pull request, grant explicit terms that may apply to CLAs that you've approved in the past?
So I think that just like us, the maintainers that are on the receiving end of these reports are not lawyers, and they will have no idea what to do with that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the TLDR on that one. Yeah. How many CLA? So Brian asked me this question on a day-to-day basis when you're doing these campaigns, Manwar. What is the average number of or what is the upper limit on number of CLAs you have to sign in a day? Is it tens? 50,
Tens. No, not hundreds. I mean, right now we have only one person doing that triaging, and we submit probably between on good days maybe 10 to 15, and then for a few of them we require like 5 to 7 CLS. That's so not even reaching 10.
Okay. And okay. One of the things that I've learned through this process, and I hear you're saying that for Open Refactory you use a organization GitHub account, right?
Well, actually we are now shifting based on my conversation with you, my experience with the maintainers, the hatred that I received, etc., from organization. So we are actually shifting to personal or individual, and I think that's a good idea, because if people see that there's some, on the other end of the spectrum, it's not like a bot looking ID, but just a human looking ID, it just makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, it like adds a bunch of overhead on the individual, and it also potentially increases the bust factor on the individual, but it does reduce the likelihood of maintainers being pissed at you.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Trade-offs. I mean,
if you get famous, as in like, let's say /famous and so on, or CNN famous or whatever, and then everybody knows about you at that point, it's a different thing. But before that, you're always having an uphill battle, and having a personal, a humane approach. So having a human name or somebody submitting it, that makes a whole lot of difference. But doesn't mean like maybe 2 years from now, there's a company that is doing it.
Don't necessarily, if there, for example, is like, if, you know, so you get hit by a bus and someone needs to take over this project, if they have to regenerate a duplicate pull request for all these projects, because like there needs to be somebody new at the wheel to make sure that I don't see that necessarily as a terrible thing, that there's 2 pull requests with the same exact contents, but somebody else now driving the second.
Would be, but we have a dashboard where we are keeping stuff. So where basically it's just a work log that's being, so everything is in our database, it's being kept. So you can look at like what in the contributor X did in the past 3 months or whatever. And then you can see like if something needs to, and you can monitor each of those pull requests. There is also a status on pull requests that we're keeping, as in the pull requests have a lifetime, as in like, okay, it has just submitted, it has been rejected, it has like requesting this, and then some action needs to be done and so on. So the pull requests now have their own journey that we have to track, and there's a dashboard for that.
Oh, interesting, because that's what Yesnia and the triage portal is eventually going to be. That so
Exactly.
that feature set will eventually live there too.
Yes.
For context, Alpha Omega is building out a triage portal to help pull in a bunch of results for a bunch of different tools like CodeQL and, you know, various different code scanners that find vulnerabilities and give those, like all those tools, a single pane of glass to review. And that portal will also hopefully assist with things like turning those reports into real vulnerability reports and real CVE, like, you know, and tracking the whole disclosure process for those tickets. That's a vision for what this portal will be, but it doesn't exist currently. But ideally, that would also integrate with these pull request campaigns as well. So, you know, in the future. But that's not necessarily the scope of this working group, but it is just something that hopefully we will see as Open Source Security Foundation and Alpha Omega. Yeah, are there any other, I appreciated the call out for GPT key signing. That was really helpful, Casimir. Thank you. Are there any other big sort of points that you think we're missing? So vulnerability report upstream, mandatory private disclosure, vulnerability messaging requirements about like information that you must provide, vulnerability fix origin, maintainer communication responsiveness, automated fix target of source code being avoiding just test changes, commit message format, repository host coordination, and disclosure assistance offer. Are there any other big things that you think that we're missing from that list of things that we should make sure that we include in any of these campaigns? Go for it, Krog.
Do you want to suggest a deadline and allow folks to kind of do homework around this? And get your feedback?
That's a long-term plan. Yeah, absolutely. I just figured while we're here, if there's anybody else that wants to.
Top of mind, sure.
Yes. This will end up getting sent out into the vulnerability disclosures working group email. So if you're not a part of the vulnerability disclosures working group Google group, I recommend you subscribe to that email chain, or also or join the Slack channel. I will try to duplicate all of the like requests for feedback into both of those locations.
Do we want to include like an alternate contact channel other than, you know, within the GitHub pull request, like commenting on that discussion?
Oh, that too. I'll also paste it there, but I can also open a ticket. So this SIG is going to operate until if we get too big, we'll move, but we'll operate within the vulnerability disclosures working group GitHub repository, but probably not all within that single issue. Bro.
Okay, so do you have an issue, or you're going to make an issue? So folks,
I will make an issue. I have not created an issue.
Great.
Casimir, did you try to do any, or actually Casimir and Manwar, did you guys try to do any bulk automated pull request generation against anybody but GitHub? Did you do anything against GitLab or Bitbucket, or did you just target GitHub?
Just GitHub for us.
Just GitHub in our experience. There's one project where we were asked to submit upstream. So it was submitted to some other, like it's not even GitLab, some other repository. I forgot what it is, but yeah, all of the top projects are residing in GitHub. So it's just
There's still some Apache Software Foundation projects that are hosted on like some random server somewhere. That is like their repositories are mirrored to GitHub, but most of our development happens on whatever that server is. I don't run into that too often, but yeah.
yeah, something like OpenDev. I have not used that. So it was the Cinder project. It's in review.opendev.org, and that's
Yep.
that's not.
All right, we are getting okay. We have 30 minutes left. There are there any is anybody engaged in any of yes, is there anybody engaged in any of these work any of this work currently for a current campaign that that they want to discuss?
I'm very interested in what you're doing with SQL injection in Java, and like, can we like create a scope for that, and then explore like whether some of that can be automated, or how much of like automated fixes are we able to generate on certain projects, and then roll that out. So we had a discussion earlier today, but I want to follow up on that part.
Yeah, so that's not something that I started writing a little bit of code for SQL injection just to like play with it, and then I think I like stashed it and haven't touched it since then. But one of my goals at some point is to try to tackle like with automate. So for those of you that may not have talked to me before, I primarily work with a bit of technology called Open Rewrite, which is a format preserving abstract syntax tree transformer that allows you to generate diffs in source code while preserving the surrounding formatting. And I've been doing work to add features over the past year, like data flow analysis and control flow analysis. That's currently only local, but hopefully will eventually be more global data flow and control flow analysis. The use case being that we can fix more complicated security vulnerabilities like zip slip and things like that require, knowing what the data flow is, knowing what the control flow of the application is in order to guarantee that the fix is sufficient. So in that context, I've been, given that if we can get data flow and control flow analysis, so data flow and control flow analysis is already being used by by CodeQL to detect SQL injection in open source software, right? You can go and run a CodeQL query against a repository and see pretty accurately that there is an SQL injection vulnerability in the code base because user supplied value flows through these 30 odd steps into this location where there's string concatenation. And given that we can find in the code where the AST, like where in the AST that vulnerable code path exists, it's not too far of a stretch to getting to the point where we could remediate that. So that's the kind of the vision. Implementation of that is more difficult. But I don't have anything specifically for you, Manoir, about that. I can when I start chewing on it, I can definitely like include you in that conversation, and I will try to peg some of that in. I will definitely peg a lot of that into the working group Slack channel.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Casimir, I don't know if you saw this, but there is a proposal there's a PEP proposal now to actually fix the tar slip vulnerability.
I have not seen that.
Oh, I will send that. I think I sent it into the AO channel. I will send that. Are you in the Slack channel?
I'm in a few of them, yeah. The
Okay.
Autofix one.
Yes, I will. Here, I'll just add you. And I'll also cross post that into the
What was the name of that bug?
it's the tar slip, so it's like zip slip. It's CVE 2007-4559, if you care.
That's the only way we should refer to these vulnerabilities, so we all know we're talking about the same thing.
No, there's actually a Twitter account that assigns random names using a predictable. It's like what 3 words, but 4 CVEs, so you can like identify them with a same name. Yeah. What 3 words for CVEs? Yeah. So one of the things that I also wanted to just bring up real quickly is that what I guess Manwar, you're also engaged in some of this work. So all of the campaigns that I've run in the past have been one-offs where I run it at the time that I run it, and then like any new code that gets written and submitted and opened into open source that is vulnerable doesn't get fixed, right? Manwar, are you running regular campaigns to regularly fix new stuff that gets identified as new changes come into open source, or is it usually one-off runs?
It's basically just a rolling basis. So I mean, we run periodically our tool, and it generates results, and one of our triagers review a small subset of this because we run a lot and we have only one triager, or right now 3 triagers, but 1 reporter, one who's overseeing the project at this point, looking into this. So it's a very small subset of these reports, and then as he or she is doing that, new reports come in that invalidate the old one. So we probably after every 3 weeks or so, we run with our updated analysis engine. So at that point, new vulnerability signatures have been introduced and so on. So maybe there's a new report at that particular point, and then effort starts on that. So there's no real, I would say, structure in being exhaustive in this thing, because I mean, it's just like there's too many bugs out there. There's no way like 2 or 3 or even 20, 30 people can be even exhaustive if we're talking about like 1,000 projects.
Yeah. And are these all pull request generations, or how are you contributing these things? Are they all based on pull requests, or is it private disclosure? Is it email disclosure?
All of them are pull requests at this point. We have submitted issues based on suggestions in the security.md file. Like they say, like, okay, submit an issue instead of a pull request, and in those cases we did that. But yeah, I mean, we just follow what the security.md suggests. That's that.
Casimir, are you guys doing? Is it with just a one-off, or do you have a continuous service running to run those campaigns?
It was just a one-off. So all the ones. So well, GitHub, because we worked with the GitHub Security Lab a bit, they sent us a list of all the repos that include tar-file. At that point in time, we went through, cloned all of them, ran the vulnerability scanner, and then patched all those that we could, and then did pull requests for those.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, this will be a problem that just goes away. It may take a couple of years, but it should, if that PEP standard gets approved, then it should just stop. Yeah, so my plan for Alpha Omega is I have a bunch of campaigns that I've been writing. Zip slip, partial path traversal, temp directory hijacking, HTTP downloader dependencies in Maven and Gradle build files. And the plan is to set those things up as continuously running scanning campaigns that will run and generate pull requests every 2 weeks, to just continuously keep get rid of a base level of security vulnerabilities from open source across the board. Modern just merged a list of 30,000 repositories that come from the CodeQL list of index projects. And so hopefully I should be able to run pull request campaigns against the similar set of 30,000 Java projects that CodeQL indexes. Okay.
I just had a thought, back to the requirements for opening a opening mass pull requests. Do we want to make sure that they're not going to be creating new pull requests for the same vulnerability in the same repo if they're doing it on a scheduled basis?
Yeah, so the way that it should work is if you're generating it against the same branch and from the same organization, it should just like the thing that it'll do is it'll basically rebase the change and make sure that it's on head, whatever the head is. Yeah, so yeah, that'll be the plan. So not generating duplicate pull requests. That did inspire me to ask a question though. So this proposal is one of the things that I'd like to see come out of this SIG. Are there any other sort of okay, so there's this, the next thing after this that I was planning on doing is once this has been reviewed by us, I would like to get reviewer feedback from maintainers. So I would like to reach out to, for example, the Apache Software Foundation. They have a security email list where I have had some maintainers, particular from the Apache Commons projects, that have gotten pissed at me in the past, and trying to engage maintainers in this dialogue of establishing these standards. So it's not just these are the standards that us who are doing automated bulk pull request generation want, but also people that are going to be on the receiving end of these things can have a say in the set of standards and practices, best practices they want to see.
Based off the discussion about different campaigns and some that are ongoing, is there a potential for different groups using similar tooling? And if you're taking on, for instance, like 30,000 repos and trying to do them every so often, is it possible that folks adhering to this specification, there would be some kind of coordination around what people are doing, so like a maintainer doesn't get multiple pull requests or issues from different folks attempting the same thing?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, hopefully this group can act as a kind of a coordination channel of like, these are the campaigns that we're doing. And if you have a better way of doing one of those campaigns, you can propose it as like a, hey, maybe you want to stop doing yours and mine's a better solution.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if is there some kind of, item you might want to consider adding to the specification about just, coordinating or registering a campaign so that other folks, can discover what campaigns already exist and they don't end up duplicating the effort.
Interesting. That's a thought. I don't know how that would work, but maybe.
I mean, one way could be, again, this is just coming off the top of my head, is the pull requests that are being submitted by these different campaigns can be like put under a specific project, specific branch, and then categorized under specific project, specific branch, and then all the pull requests that are submitted to that. That way, like if somebody is submitting, it might be like that somebody can look it up and before submitting, like especially the manual ones that we are doing, and then stop triaging something that, or spending even time on triaging on something that has already been submitted by others. But I mean, that would require that there's a central place where these data are going to come in and will find a home.
We definitely haven't had enough of these campaigns run to have that cause a problem. I will correct that. There has been a set of campaigns that I've run where someone from, for example, the Jenkins team ran a campaign targeting only the Jenkins projects to fix a vulnerability. And then I ran my own and generated a new pull request. And then I think that I ran that same campaign again a third time with a different system, and ended up with some projects in the Jenkins project having 3 pull requests, one from the original, like the security person for the Jenkins projects, myself from 2019, then myself from 2022. But like that was because that same pull request hadn't been merged for 4 years. Like the fix hasn't been merged for 4 years. So that's more an indication of like this project is not maintained clearly.
And
Right.
that relates to another question. I mean, and Casimir can also answer that. I mean, I've asked that to you, as in because you're generating things at bulk, it's just hard to keep track of the pull the status of the pull requests that I was referring to, as in like what happens in that, because the pull requests have their own lifetime. And
Yes.
like, is there any like post pull request track that you did, or like how many of them have gotten merged, like the recent the Trellix one with like what 60,000 plus, how many of them have been merged yet?
I can go ahead and answer. So for the exact merge number, I don't have it off the top of my head. We've had a good amount merged already. As you said, we had over 60,000 pull requests that we sent out, which was a bit tough to manage. So every day, one of the people who worked with me, his name's Charles, he went through the email associated with the GitHub account and looked through just any emails responding to the pull requests. We did miss a lot, which was one of the issues. And that was, again, the balance of, trying to keep up with all those pull requests and not letting anything fall through the cracks, but also only having limited resources. So we did have some people complaining that we weren't monitoring just to see, people's responses and all that, which was interesting. Definitely hard to keep that balance there.
Well, at 60,000 plus pull requests, it's just unfair to expect that you guys will be able to manage that. I mean, that would require, but I mean, I've followed that work. By the way, it's good to meet with you. So side talk.
Meet with you too.
My statistics range from 40% to 20% to 5%, depending. Like 20% is usually like for some of the campaigns that were more common. I had a 5% merge rate on a campaign that was targeting projects that mostly included code that was for projects that were like mostly one-offs, right? It was a code generator generating a base project, and like a lot of people generated that base project as part of like a class or trying something new. But and then the one campaign that has a 40% merge rate is the HTTP downloader dependencies one, and that's since 2019. So it took like 4 years to get to the point where we had 40%, and generally it takes about 20. It can take a couple months to get to about 20%. Getting to 40% can take much longer. And I think that most of the repositories that don't react at all are mostly because they're like unmaintained. Yeah, Yesnia is working. So one of the things that I do is I have a tracking GitHub repository, or I have a tracking issue that I always create for any of these campaigns. And so anytime I generate these campaigns, all of the campaigns will point to a single issue, and you can use the GitHub API to scrape that issue and see all of the pull requests that it backlinks to. And that can give you a really good indication of which pull requests were created. Like that can give you a really good way of tracking that for the future. If you can't, like, if you're not recording all the pull request URLs as you're generating the PRs. So yeah, so hopefully I should have more detailed statistics that we can come up with and present with some stuff that Yesenia is doing. Yesenia, sorry. We have about 10 minutes left. Other than including the like actual maintainers in this discussion, are there any other big, so we've had for ideas of like kind of deliverables for this working group, this specification, maybe some coordination around making sure the campaigns don't step on each other. Are there any other big sort of items that people would like to see this working group or SIG, not working group, this SIG create or develop or you know have ownership over?
I don't know if it's within the scope, but on you know, the sort of thing I'm interested in is also it's the systemization of the patching of the vulnerabilities once they, you know, like a vulnerability has been discovered and that's happened, and there's, you know, there's a vulnerability disclosure. So from that lens, I was interested in, you know, common machine readable syntax for these things. So it sounds like it's pretty early days with some PRs, but if we're using campaigns that are, you know, doing things at scale, you know, some kind of way of coordinating, you know, standardization of the sort of the metadata or what you're doing when you're submitting it between different campaigns, so that you know, after the fact, you know, that information is you know, can be inspected by other automation tools. Does that make sense?
Yes, there is in the commit message format and GPG key signing part of the specification. Item number 3 is commit messages should, it's not a must. Also, anybody who wants to discuss the musts and shoulds that I've put in here, please don't hesitate to do so. But I have a should that it should follow the CCOM convention, which is a convention that is not very well known about. It's somebody that did a research project out of some university. But it's a standard for commit messages that describe or that are commit messages for specifically for a security fix. So since you're automating the generation of these pull requests anyways, right, you might as well generate a commit message that is following a standard. And so that may be a good starting point. But
Awesome, thanks.
If you want something more than that, that also, like, if you want something that's not just the commit message, but you want something external to that, that also could be a potential. Are you talking about mostly in the commit message, or are you talking about an external deliverable that like encodes that information in some place that's unified?
If I'm looking at sort of the, you know, developing tooling to unify that information, or look at tooling already does that, and aggregating that information, you know, I've looked at examples of like a tool that has submitted an issue. There was a CVE, and then I was looking to trace it, and then in the commit that addresses that CVE, you know, there was a between the different, you know, the different machines that are submitting this, there was a disconnect, and so I'm just thinking like systemically that can happen quite a bit. So this is a great starting point for me. So that's good for now.
Yeah, the problem is that most of the time when the commit message is drafted for the fix, the CVE hasn't been issued yet. Right. So CCOM does have a field for CVE number, but most of the time it doesn't exist when the commit's being created. That's not necessarily the order in which things need to happen. You can get a CVE first, but getting a CVE number is actually takes time, which can be a blocker for developing the fix.
Is there a way to, if there's a pull request and there's a patch, and the patch is released that addresses this, but there's no CVE number because there's too much overhead or it takes too much time, is there some other kind of way to systemically identify that a patch has a security, like is a security patch, not just a feature patch or a version bump or something like that?
Well, so one of the things that I often do when I'm doing these campaigns, I will ask the maintainer, hey, did this fix a real security vulnerability, or do you like, and I have had a lot of people that have been like, thank you, this is great, it's a security hardening, but I don't consider it a security vulnerability fix, right? So in those cases, you, if you're looking at that data, right, you're going to miss out on the nuance of a conversation that may have occurred where the maintainer's like, I'm going to merge this anyways, but I don't necessarily consider this worthy of a CVE. And like there might be an argument that like they're wrong, and that takes energy that sometimes I don't have. So that's also part of it too. Is like maybe there should have been a CVE there too, and there isn't.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. The reason that we're automating this stuff is because it's big. And then if you have to fight with every single maintainer about CVE issuance or not, it stays big. And it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at it through the lens of, even once there are CVEs, there's CVEs everywhere that go unpatched. So how do you systemically?
You could, I mean, there's a theory, you could theoretically have a GSD, right? The global security, the global or GSD, they could give us an ID subset that are for this stuff, right? And so it could end up in the GSD database specifically under this could be a security vulnerability, but maybe not. If you want to include it in something that you are using as a signal, go for it. But it may have a higher false positive rate than CVE does.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Rob, does that make sense with the context of what you understand GSD to be? Yeah. Big nod. That's actually a good thought. I hadn't thought about tying in GSD as like a CVE light. We have 2 minutes. Anybody have any final closing thoughts, questions, concerns, anything they want to share? If not, thank you all for coming. Feel free to invite your friends. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to working with you all together to do more of this stuff in the future. And I hope that none of your experiences with bulk pull request generation has scared you away, because I truly think this is the best way for us to scale our knowledge of, math science, technology, and security to have the biggest positive impact that we can across the industry. So I really appreciate you all being here and engaging in this conversation, because I think it's an important thing for us to try to do and do well in a way that respects maintainers. So thank you.
thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Be well.